wanted to talk about something that's just like kind of on my mind a lot right now because I'm starting this business and just like kind of like how I decided to go into this and why, like kind of a little bit about the tech industry and why I think there's a need for better support and coaching for eng leaders and managers.
Cool. That's not a surprising topic. I
Yeah.
thought you were going to say something totally random. Because like sometimes I have people on and they're like talking about something completely different than what I think they're going to talk about. But this is great. So yeah, just tell me a bit about, your current job situation and how you switch and, the whole story.
Yeah, so I was at Medium for over 5 years and kind of in some IC and then tech lead and project lead. And then about maybe 3 years ago, I started heading and engineering management. By the time I left, I was managing a team of like 15 people and then like running a product engineering on a product team. And then when I was thinking of leaving, I was really thinking about two things. One was like going to a startup with like 10-ish engineers and then like trying to join as a VP or head of eng and then building out that team. And then the second thing was this, which I had really no idea like if there would be, I mean, I know there's a need for it, but I didn't know if there would be demand for it. And it really kind of terrified me. But at a time when I felt like I wanted to do something that was more outside my comfort zone than what I had been doing. So the other option, which was to join someplace full time, seemed pretty comfortable.
Even if it's a much smaller company and you have a lot more responsibility, it's still more comfortable than this.
Yeah, like I was like, well, I think it'll be different because I'll be the one ultimately accountable for the whole engineering team and hiring, but I kind of like know roughly what that looks like, and this was like I have no idea. Like especially the selling and the marketing and yeah, I had never done my own thing. I mean, I guess I left Google without anything lined up, and I had done some Android development, but I didn't make any money off of it. I was just like taking some time to ramp up on Android.
So was Google your first job out of college? I don't remember the whole order.
Yeah. So I had interned at Google in New York between my junior and senior year, and that's actually where I met my husband. And then he had moved out to Mountain View, and so I had my offer transferred out here too when I had a full-time offer.
And how long were you at Google for?
A year and a half.
Okay, and what was the decision to leave then? Because you're saying you wanted to leave without a second job or something lined up. And what was that decision point?
Yeah, I was just thinking about this today. I was just walking around. At the time, I was thinking like when I joined Google, I thought, oh, I'll be here for, maybe 2 to 3 years and just like ramp up and like learn a little bit more about industry standards, and then I'll probably move on. And I don't know why I had that like really clear idea of like, this is not where I'm going to be long term. But about a year and a half in, I really liked my team. It was like a super good team. My husband had left like maybe like a year before I left Google. And so I sort of was starting to see that there was maybe like more out there, it was just like kind of like, it sounds kind of silly because like, when you come out to Silicon Valley, you just assume like people know what's going on, but that wasn't really true for me at Google. Like it's pretty isolated, like moving out here and starting immediately. I didn't really know anything about startups.
Well, that's also many years ago too. What years was that around?
So I graduated in 2008. So I worked there from 2008 through the beginning of 2010. And yeah, even in school, I didn't know anything about startups or I knew Google was supposed to be a good place to work, and that was about it. So I don't know, there was something about like, I knew that there was probably other things out there to explore, and it didn't seem like it would get easier to leave because it's like a nice place to work. It's comfortable. And I could kind of see myself getting like more and more comfortable there. So I had like a little bit of money saved up and figured, I'll just quit and see what happens. It didn't seem like a huge risk at the time, even though I definitely had imposter syndrome. And I was like, oh, I snuck in here, and like, what if I like tried to get back in? They're like, oh, we made a mistake. So there was definitely like some doubt, but I don't know. Even at that time, I was thinking of like even like moving out of software and doing something else. So it's just
Even
kind
that
of,
early. I mean, even within 2 years of as a new grad, that's pretty early.
yeah, I think at that time it was like, I mean, I really fell in love not with like building applications, but really like the CS side of like doing I took like machine learning and like AI courses, and I really like loved doing projects in the coding part. And then working at a big company, even though Google, I feel like as a big company, things move pretty quickly, but a lot of my time wasn't doing that. And it was like, I don't know, coordinating like, okay, this team's release cycle is every 2 weeks and this team's every 3 weeks. So we have to get this like small change in at this specific point so that and just like things, there's like a lot of back and forth and like inter-team code reviews. And I don't know, it just wasn't like, I just didn't see myself doing it for a long time without trying something else.
Right. But I guess circling back to almost the present day, I mean, as an engineering manager and leader, a lot of what you do is not coding, and it is the coordination
Yeah.
and all the stuff that you wanted to avoid 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And even like, so like a few years ago, I realized that I'm an introvert, and and like so it's like a very like, I've chosen to spend a lot of my time talking to people, and I've gotten a lot of like people telling me that this is something I'm really good at, and I think it's taken me some time to see that I can have a lot of impact doing this and that I enjoy it. And actually, it's pretty interesting because now sometimes I'll have these conversations with people that I've never met before, and like if I have a bunch of them at the end of the day, I'll actually feel energized, and I'm like, oh, am I becoming an extrovert? But yeah, I don't know. I think it's yeah, it is interesting because I think some people move into management and they really miss the coding. And I definitely had that phase, but it doesn't seem to have continued. Like I'm
Right.
not,
And I guess,
I'm not working on side projects, and yeah.
yeah, I guess that kind of segues into what, this is that you alluded
hmm
to at the very beginning. So I guess talk a little bit about what your current kind of journey is.
hmm Yeah, so I've been doing this for, let's see, it's June, so about 2 months. I've been just meeting a lot of people. I have a mix. I have like a few clients, and it's just like every company is super different in what their needs are. And I'm still trying to figure out like how to like, I know I need to figure out like a clear focus, because that's how you sell your services. But then like I feel like every company needs something a little bit different, So if I say, oh, I'm going to offer coaching on like 3 to 6 months or 3 month minimum, like coaching sessions every week, I think some companies are like, oh, I really want to try it for like a month, or like have a few sessions and then see if I want to expand to the rest of my team, or like what they need. I'm finding the smaller companies, what they actually need is a bit more tactical help around like setting up a hiring process for engineers. So I don't know. It's interesting to figure out like how much I should cater to what people want, because just as I'm getting started, I feel like I'm going to have to like hustle a little bit more, and I can't be too choosy. but then I also don't want that to sort of dilute the value of what I want to do.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And also, we're talking at a very, I mean, this has been 2 months, right?
Yeah.
It's a very early stage. So, it's interesting to talk to you at this time because, hopefully down the line, however long it is, you have your story figured out and it's just kind of a matter of turning the crank and you have your process. But now it's still in the exploratory and kind of, I mean, you kind of are the prototype at this point, right? You're in the prototyping stage with yourself and your career. So it is, it's hard to say a polished story at this point. So I totally get that.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. Like, even just, when I was commuting to Medium in San Francisco, I basically had no time where I was just by myself. Like, unless I really actively made time, because I have two kids. So I have a 4-year-old and a 1.5-year-old. And so, like, in the morning, it's dropping them off, and then I'd be at work. And then, well, I guess on BART, I was kind of by myself. I go to work, come home, kids, hang out with my husband, and then on the weekends it's like kind of full time.
Right.
They're
Full-time
there.
mode, yeah.
Yeah, and so now I have, I have a lot of meetings, but in any given week, I still have a lot of hours where I have time to write or just have a little bit more time to myself. And it's interesting because I can kind of like make some observations about myself and like, I thought, oh, it would be great if I didn't have meetings or like had at least 2 blocks of like, 3 to 4 hours where I can write. But then I found that like at the end of that, I'm kind of missing social interaction.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm like, oh, like it's at the end of those days when I'm like, oh, my business is like not going well.
Well, yeah, I mean, it gives you a chance to self-reflect too, right? Like at the end of the day, even something
Right.
as simple as like, was this a good day or not? And then, enough good days are correlated with seeing, at least one meeting with someone or at least one thing you wrote. So, and so do you keep like a, from a weekday schedule, like you're home by yourself working and that's your work time? Is that how you've divided things?
It really depends. Like I try to like not go to San Francisco every day. So usually in any given week, if I offer people some times for meetings in San Francisco, I'll try to like batch them up into 3 days, sometimes 4 days if that's the only time someone's available. And it's kind of nice even to like work in like a co-working space or a coffee shop in San Francisco too. So it's not like I just like don't want to go to San Francisco, but yeah, I do try to keep like 1 or 2 like chunks of time to do like emails and find time to write because I haven't had that time to write in quite a few years.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a common thing because I mean, I talked to many friends and colleagues who've gone a more independent route. I mean, they've worked at a company for N years and they're doing their own consulting business or they're doing their own startup, doing a product thing. And it is a big change, right? Especially if you're starting off, if you're mainly working independently by yourself and you're used to a office environment, it is it's a big mental change. And it's interesting to see how people, adjust to that.
Yeah. And like even my work is with people, right? Mm-hmm. So even with that, it still can be lonely if I'm by myself for too long, and that's being an introvert too. So
right. So are all these people you're talking to companies, is this all through kind of your personal network at this point of people you've met and known through the years of working in tech?
Most of the people I'm meeting are not people I know, but they're usually introduced through people I know, but it's not like people I know super well, which is interesting because, I talked to someone who had done some consulting work and he made a point of like, it's not about your strong connections, you're like 3 to 5 really good friends. It's about your like hundreds of weak connections and like making those and kind of keeping those alive. And I hadn't really thought about that until he said it. And it's like, oh, that makes sense. Because like my first client was through, I think they were referred to me through like an intern Medium had like 4 years ago. And I don't even know if I've ever had a conversation with him. So.
Yeah, and I think that that's totally true, and in my experience, and also I think with your online writing and web presence, I think that helps a lot, right? Because a lot of times these weak connections, you don't need to know people super well, like you said, right? It's like it's just they've heard of you, or they know of you through someone else, or they've read your
Right.
writing even. So I think that's why it's super important, especially in the work that you do, to keep up that writing presence and the online presence, because people are reminded, they remember your name, like, oh yeah, you wrote on this thing, like I totally makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, the writing is like hard for me. I mean, the last two posts I wrote, I definitely spent more time on. Like they probably each took me most of a day each. And
That's not that much time, actually. I mean, but yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I guess
It's
not,
still
but
pretty
like
good.
yeah. But it's still like time I could be spending, trying to get leads or like doing that kind of work, right? And I was thinking like I don't know if it's like how much time I should be spending on this. Am I just trying to justify it because I enjoy it, right? And how much is it I enjoy and how much is it contributing to my business? Um, but then I don't know, like I think as you're saying, like people remember my name and then they're like, oh, maybe you should talk to Jean. And then I think for them to kind of see a flow of like writing pop up on Medium or LinkedIn or Twitter, and then maybe they go in and read it. And it might be people that don't know me very well. And then they're like, oh, that makes sense. So then they feel more confident, recommending me to someone. And then that person might go read it and think, oh, this person knows what they're talking about. And like, because engineering manager, which is my role at Medium, that means a lot of different things at different companies. It could be like I manage two people, and yeah, it's like a pretty variable title, I think.
Yeah, and also, yeah, I mean, and the other thing I was thinking about this is, do you have a sense of the other, I guess your quote unquote competition in this area? Are these, is your competition other people like yourself who are
Mhm.
fairly independent, or do these companies hire like a, some nameless firm with a lot of people in
Mhm.
suits, or is the competition them not wanting these services and just doing nothing? I mean, what do you feel that, this space is? So I have no idea about this space.
I think it's a mix. So I'm actually in touch with like 4 or 5 other people doing similar stuff, but it's very like it feels very friendly and collaborative. Like we're all in different phases and have taken pretty different approaches. Like some people are only doing remote, some people are doing kind of like a online course type thing. Someone who left Slack a few months ago is kind of on a very similar timeline to me, and we trade notes and see like what's helpful and so that doesn't feel competitive at all. Like I think we all see that the industry could really use this, and we all want to like help each other, find success doing this. I do think some of the larger companies are probably like focusing more on like trainings, like training their managers through like workshops, or I know some of them are doing like there's some bigger companies like Everwise, I think I've heard is one where they pair you up with mentors. But I think the unique part of what like I'm offering and what other people doing the similar space are offering is that most of these coaches don't have engineering backgrounds, and
Right.
so they don't have that shared language and like experience.
Right. Yeah. The nameless suits in a big firm thing. Just yeah. I think this combination of coming from an engineering background and targeting that niche, I think is really key. So how would you imagine, what words would you use to describe your current role then? I mean, it may be hard and amorphous at this point, but what, or do you use different sets of terms with different people?
Uh, Kind of different sets of terms with different people. Like if I'm talking to, well, I'll usually have a conversation. So if it's like, a 5-person startup, um, they're probably not going to pay for one person to get weekly coaching.
Mhm.
Um, and so I'll try to figure out what are their most urgent needs, which is usually hiring. Like maybe they've never really had a rigorous hiring process that's not just like their friends, right? So figure out what those needs are and then see if that's something that I kind of want to do. Like if it's like super far off from my core competency or like what I want to do, I probably would just be like, hey, you know, this other people might be like, if they're like, oh, I want you to just do like sourcing for us,
right.
or like Android engineers, I'm probably going to be like, oh, you should get a recruiter or something. But I mean, there's some things like if they're looking for a VP Eng and they don't really know what a VP Eng does or how to hire one, like that's something where I feel like I could really help out of like, you know, how to appeal to someone who's like a manager or director at a larger company, and they might be interested in that. Because if you're like looking for someone who's already a VP Eng, they're probably, you know, they probably don't want to be a VP Eng of a 5-person startup.
Right.
So like, yeah, for smaller companies, I try to figure out what their kind of urgent need is and help them have like pitch it as more of like, you're paying for these results.
Mm-hmm.
For larger companies, I'm finding that people, I think, are not really thinking of coaching as a general like preventative, like oh, this person's moving into management, let's coach them. They're usually looking at it when it's like there's dysfunction and issues arising. So that's kind of been a shift for me, because I'm like, well, you should totally come up with a hiring plan before like you're not, you know, you've made 10 offers and everyone's rejected your offer, and then you're figuring out like what's wrong, right? But I don't know, I feel like companies are kind of in a more reactive mode, especially when hiring consultants and coaches.
Right. I mean, that seems like the typical model of this is kind of emergency room model of like, oh man, something's going wrong. Let's throw something at it rather than preventive, like you're talking about earlier. I mean, do you feel like at a bigger company, you know, who is the one paying for this and how would they convince people to pay for this? So imagine like if you're going to a company like Google or Microsoft or some, you know, name a big tech company, how would you pitch your services and to whom, and like, you know, is there a greater bureaucracy in getting people like you hired as consultants?
I'm still figuring out, like, I mean, at first I had just completely ruled out the big companies, because I imagined that, like, you know, if I had to go through their head of learning and development, they would just be like, why would we work with you? We can just work with this like other firm and do it all at once, right? But then I realized that like Google just has such deep pockets that like people can probably just reimburse it and doesn't have to go through that much process. But I think so
it's
for
like,
that,
it's like you just get your manager's approval or something. So it's like a, you know, going to a conference or a training course or some kind of a, you know, payment like that, maybe.
Right. And in that case, I think probably the person to talk to would be like directors, to see if they have any managers working with them that they would like to get coaching for. Because I think you'd probably want the person higher up to say like, this person needs coaching, or, you know, it'd be good for this person to get coaching.
Right. Well, because they need to sign off on the reimbursement. Right. They're the ones that need to sign off ultimately. Yeah, that's really interesting. The kind of the targeting different sizes and being, you know, and who knows, right? I mean, maybe in a few months you find that one of these niches is the most, you know, is the best one for you, and you're just turning the crank on that one, right? But at this point, it's hard to tell.
Yeah, right now it's like I don't have enough data points to say like this is working. Like even when I have a success, it's like, cool, I don't know if it's just like me and this person hit it off, or like, you know, they already had socialized coaching in their org, or there's just so many different like possibilities. But I do think like,
go ahead.
Like, I don't know, it changes. Like I had thought of targeting like these small companies where, you know, maybe there's younger founders and they don't quite know that much about management. But I have this like other hypothesis that like maybe those founders, especially if they're getting like large sums of funding, may not, like, until they have a problem, like why wouldn't they just think, well, I could probably figure it out, right? Because that's like, they probably never started a company and they got funding. So yeah, it's pretty interesting. Like the whole ecosystem has like all these intricacies of like funding, like who's getting funded, and like how much do VCs care about coaching? What kinds of VCs care about coaching?
Yeah, it's I mean, it's one of these things where everybody is really busy doing their main thing, right? You're in a small company or a big company. Everyone has more than enough stuff to do. So bringing in somebody external for a preventive, or a structural thing, rather than oh man, something is going wrong right now. There's a fire right now. We need someone to put it out. That has a clearer model of like, something exploded. We need someone to fix that right now versus this longer term development thing. And yeah, I think it is a challenge. There's not a clear, obvious point of entry oftentimes.
Yeah. Or I think coaching can also feel like it's investing in that employee's personal development, but it's not really benefiting the company that much. But I don't know. I feel like I've seen the effects of coaching on like ICs, like not even managers, and and most companies have coaching for execs, but like Medium at some points had coaching available to anyone, and I feel like it can make a really huge difference, like for people to be coached to be their most effective selves at work. Like that totally has an effect on the company.
Yeah, totally. And it's and even just informally talking to people, right? Like you see, I mean, now I'm a bit older than you are, but I mean, I've seen people from college. So I graduated around 2005, so a few years older than you are. And so many of my friends, I was CS. Many of my friends are in the Bay Area working and stuff, and it's interesting to follow their career trajectories. It's been 12, 13 or so years. And it's fascinating how, assuming everyone, went to a really good school, they did well in school, they all, started out at a fairly same point. It's just fascinating with the difference in people's career trajectories, or even like more generally life trajectories, right, quote unquote, just from early kinds of things, right? And because it compounds, right? All these advantages and these things compound, and it's obviously these aren't controlled experiments, but it's just a lot of anecdote. But I totally see that, just the effect of simple interventions up front, especially when at the junior level, right? Like you're saying, like at the executive level, they have all this coaching for all this stuff. But even at the more junior mid levels, like it makes such a difference. But it's hard oftentimes for people to see if they're not in that situation. So it is a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I saw this at Medium, where like we provide support to the new grads, and then 3 years later, like there's this cohort that's just like the core contributors and like the heart of our engineering team, right? It's like you can't just ignore them and be like, oh, I'll just meet with them every month because they don't really need that much help. They're so junior. Like that's such a mistake.
Yeah, and what do you think? I mean, speaking of that, I mean, at startups, what do you think about, I mean, it's great for the individuals, right? But what do you think about the situation where you invest in folks up front, but then they end up leaving the company a year later, 2 years later? And it's great for the industry, obviously, to have junior folks with good talents and good habits spreading out the different ecosystem. But what about for that company itself?
I mean, I think most people move when they're bored or unhappy, and like even if they're happy, they could still be kind of bored. But I think I'm happy when people move on, especially like people who are new grads, and they've been at a company for a few years. Like I think that's a really good time to like see what else is out there, and if they've had a good experience at your company, like it's good for the reputation of the company that like, oh, this person worked at this place, and like for that reputation of like, okay, now when people see resumes of like, oh, this person worked at this team, I knew someone else who worked on that team and they were really excellent, and they must have like really high standard and like technical expertise, right? And I just think like, I don't know, I just think you should just like take care of people. And like, I mean, I guess, I was at Google for a year and a half. I don't feel like bad about it because I feel like Google just has so many new grads, and they train them up, and then sometimes they keep some and sometimes they lose them to other people. But like they have a pretty like active alumni network, and the fact that I had a positive time there, maybe in like 5 or 10 years, I'll think of going back, and because I had this great great experience. Or even the people that I've worked with who are new grads, maybe in 5 years we'll be at the same company. And I don't know, I just care more about the relationships than kind of, I think if you treat people well, like they'll probably stay longer, right?
Yeah, that's true. Both they'll stay longer, and even if they go, I mean, you have a great point, is that it elevates the reputation of the company, right? So that when they see future resumes, or when they're going to colleges to recruit, people have a good feeling about, company X. I've heard good things about them because this person worked there and wrote all these blog posts, and then they went somewhere else ultimately, but they had a good time there and they reported well. So I think, yeah, that's a great point, that if you're playing the long game, over many years, it helps to have people even leaving with good impressions.
Yeah, but I think even in the short term, like if you have a good manager, they can kind of be on the lookout for like, what would this person like, what do you need to keep this person like constantly challenged, right? Like one of my goals, like after Medium had layoffs, or even just in general, when like, things were a little bit more unstable, like one of my goals as a manager was just like, I don't want to be surprised when people leave. Like if people leave, that's fine, but like I want there to be enough trust between people I work with, like who are my direct reports, and me, that like, it's a conversation, and it's not like, they're not like, oh, what if I tell Jean I'm thinking of leaving and then she fires me? Like that's because some people worry about that, right? Like what? Oh, I'm not going to tell my manager until I give my 2 weeks notice.
In the final minutes, I guess, in closing, I mean, maybe reflect on what motivated you initially to go from, leaving your full-time job to going to this, or were there alternatives that you wanted to try? And was this the only, like, was this calling to you for years or months and you're like, I have to do this now? When did this all start?
I had thought about it for maybe a few months, just because I think like, so I turned, like last November, I turned 30, and then in December, I hit my 5-year mark at Medium, and it was like the end of the year. So just all these like reflective moments all combining into this like 2-month period. So I was thinking a lot about what I wanted to do next, and this was kind of something I had thought a little bit about, but I hadn't really like articulated. It's like something I wanted to do. And then when like after things had settled down a little bit after the layoffs, it just felt like kind of the right time to move on for me. And then so then I was, for context, like my husband and I want to move to Europe for a few months next year, because our daughter is going to start kindergarten in September 2018. So that was also a logistical kind of constraint, because if I joined a team, I would have wanted to build out a team, like, to join as head of engineering or VP, and then like hire and build out a team that I was then like would work with. So I think of that as at least like a 2 to 3 year commitment minimum. And so it didn't make sense to do that now. It's like, okay, so maybe I should do this other thing that's like really scary, but maybe I could do this and then take some clients remotely if we're in Europe. So sort of a side context for.
Yeah, I mean, that's all part of the right context. I mean, life, it's not just work, right? Life is surrounding it. And oftentimes these are good forcing functions. Well, anyways, thank you so much for appearing on air, and we'll chat more offline. So thanks, Jane.
Okay, sounds good.
All righty.